Two cars, that's all Carroll Shelby built. Twin Paxton superchargers, 800 horsepower, stuffed into a 2,000-pound chassis running brakes designed for a completely different era. Ford's legal team read the spec sheet and went pale. One car went to a comedian who drove it once around the block and handed the keys straight back. The second went off a cliff into the Pacific Ocean when the throttle jammed wide open. Ford didn't kill the Super Snake because it failed. They killed it because it worked, and what it did to a driver at 150 miles per hour was something no corporate lawyer on earth could defend. It started with humiliation. Shelby's own attorney, Stan Mullen, outran Shelby's personal 427 Cobra on the highways around Lake Tahoe. The car that beat him was a Ferrari 275 GTB. Mullen wasn't a racing driver. He was a lawyer, and he left Carroll Shelby in his mirrors on a public road. Shelby walked into his shop the next morning and gave his crew a single instruction: build something that obliterates everything. No budget ceiling, no safety brief, no ceiling of any kind. His guys started with the right foundation. The base car was CSX 3015, one of only 23 original 427 competition roadsters ever produced. This wasn't a street Cobra dressed up for the occasion. It was a purpose-built competition chassis, lighter and stiffer than anything rolling out of the standard production line. The engine block was Ford's 427 FV side oiler, date-coded December 17, 1965, already one of the most brutal big block units Ford has ever manufactured. Then they bolted on two Paxton centrifugal superchargers. Each one ran 6 pounds of boost. Combined, they were force-feeding air into an engine that was already at the edge of its natural aspiration limit. The fueling system was equally radical. Dual Holley 4-barrel carburetors sitting on an experimental Edelbrock intake manifold. No production equivalent existed for that intake in 1966. Shelby's team fabricated the solution they needed because the parts catalog simply didn't have one. The transmission was a Ford C6 3-speed automatic. That choice wasn't a comfort decision. It was the only option. No manual gearbox built in 1966 could survive the torque load this engine produced under boost. The C6 was the last man standing. Estimated output landed around 800 horsepower. Road and Track tested CSX 3015 and called it the Cobra to end all Cobras in their February 1968 issue. They also noted, quietly, that the horsepower figure might have been slightly optimistic. Even if they were right, even if the real number was 720 or 750, the math was still catastrophic. Shelby claimed it ran the quarter mile in the low 11-second range and cracked 60 miles per hour in just over 3 seconds. Those numbers, even conservatively interpreted, put this car in a category that had no street-legal peer anywhere in the world in 1966. The dyno sheet read like an engineering triumph. The chassis sitting underneath that engine told a completely different story. The Mark III coil spring chassis was engineered around one specific number: 485 horsepower. That wasn't a conservative estimate or a rough guideline. It was a hard engineering ceiling, calculated across every suspension pickup point, every control arm load path, every stress curve in the chassis tubing. When Shelby's team added forced induction and pushed output past 800 horsepower, they didn't just exceed that ceiling. They changed the load curves on every suspension component simultaneously, and the chassis had no engineering margin left to absorb the difference. The wheelbase was 90 inches. That's a short number for a car generating this kind of thrust. Under full boost, weight transferred rearward so aggressively that the front tires lost meaningful contact with the road surface before the rear tires could find their grip limit. The rear stepped out, and it didn't step out gradually, the way a well-sorted performance car communicates its limits to the driver. It snapped. By the time a driver registered the slip, the correction window was already closed. No suspension tuning available in 1966 could fix that. The geometry simply didn't allow it. The brakes compounded the problem directly. CSX 3015 ran 4-wheel Girling disc brakes, which were a legitimate performance specification for a 485 horsepower car operating at racing speeds. Against an 800 horsepower car carrying full momentum from 150 miles per hour, those same brakes faced a thermal load they weren't built to survive. The rotors couldn't shed heat fast enough. Brake fade wasn't a risk. It was a timetable. Every high-speed stop brought the system closer to the point where the pedal gave the driver nothing back. This wasn't a new problem without a paper trail. Ken Miles had already documented exactly what a big block engine did to a Cobra chassis that wasn't designed for it. He took CSX 2196, an iron 427 stuffed into a Mark II leaf spring chassis, to Sebring, and managed to hit the only tree on the entire circuit. He described the car as virtually undrivable. That car made significantly less power than the Super Snake. Miles was one of the most skilled test drivers alive in 1966, and the chassis beat him anyway. The Super Snake took every problem Miles documented and multiplied it. Then it added one more variable he hadn't dealt with: supercharger lag. Power delivery from the twin Paxtons wasn't linear. It built, then it arrived, hard, in a surge that overwhelmed mechanical grip without the progressive warning a naturally aspirated engine provided. A driver couldn't feel it coming and manage it. The boost hit, the rear tires broke loose, and the physics took over. CSX 3303 confirmed what the engineering already predicted. A Ford dealer on Van Ness Avenue in San Francisco sold the second Super Snake to a buyer named Tony Maxey. While Maxey drove along the California coast, the throttle jammed wide open. He lost control and the car went off a cliff into the Pacific Ocean. He survived the initial impact, but succumbed to his injuries shortly thereafter. Within weeks, the incident report landed directly on the desks of Ford's legal team. The wreckage was reportedly covered from the site, but CSX 3303 has never been publicly confirmed to exist in any restored form. Ford's legal and product liability teams had the incident report within weeks. This wasn't a theoretical failure mode anymore. It was a documented fatality scenario with a paper trail connected to the throttle, the cliff, and Ford's own engine and transmission sitting inside the car. The NHRA and SCCA rulebooks in 1966 had no classification framework for a street-registered car at this power level. Homologation was impossible. The car couldn't race legally, couldn't carry regulatory cover, and couldn't be insured. Ford had funded the engines, the transmissions, and the shop time. Now they owned the liability. The corporate memo didn't need to say much. The physics had already written it. Ford's decision arrived without ceremony. No press release, no official statement, no acknowledgement that the program had existed at all. The Super Snake simply stopped. Internally, the position was clear. The car was uninsurable, unclassifiable, and built with Ford components on Ford's dime. Burying it quietly was cheaper than defending it publicly. Shelby didn't fight it. The GT40 program was consuming everything his operation had left, and arguing over two cars with Dearborn's legal department was a losing position from the first sentence. He absorbed the decision and moved on. CSX 3015 entered a long, quiet passage through private hands. The original Guardsman Blue disappeared under a coat of black. The black disappeared under Viking Blue. 3 owners, 3 decisions about what the car should look like, each new layer of paint putting more distance between the car and corporate burial Dearborn had arranged for. Nobody at Ford was watching. Nobody needed to. Then Barrett Jackson Scottsdale got hold of it. CSX 3015 crossed that auction block in 2007 and sold for $5.5 million. It came back in 2015 and brought $5.1 million. It came back again in 2021 and hit $5.5 million a second time. 3 sales, 1 car, $16.1 million combined. The car Ford never acknowledged publicly has generated more auction revenue than most complete model year productions run from that era. CSX 3303 never got that second chapter. The wreckage from the California coast was reportedly recovered, but no restoration has ever been publicly confirmed. It doesn't appear in the authenticated Shelby registry in any completed form. Every other significant Cobra prototype from this period has been found, documented, or restored. CSX 3003 remains the one gap, the one car in the entire Super Snake record that nobody has been able to fully account for. The engineering problem the Super Snake exposed didn't go away when Ford buried the program. It just took 60 years and several $billion in development to actually solve it. Today's factory 800 horsepower cars, the Dodge Demon, the GT500, the Corvette Z06, ship with stability management systems processing sensor data thousands of times per second. ABS modulates brake pressure at each individual corner. Traction control reads wheel slip and cuts power before the rear steps out. Launch control manages boost delivery so the surge the twin Paxtons dumped on Tony Maxey's rear tires arrives in a controlled, metered sequence instead of all at once. Those systems are doing in milliseconds what the Super Snake required a driver to do with his hands and feet at 150 miles per hour. The physics haven't changed. The chassis still wants to swap ends under hard boost. The brakes still generate heat the rotors have to survive. Every modern high-horsepower OEM program is still fighting the same problem Shelby's chassis exposed in 1966. The difference is that now the car catches itself before the driver has to. Ford's lawyers read the CSX 3303 incident report and made a business decision. What they didn't understand was that the engineering problem inside that report became the foundational question every serious performance program spent the next 5 decades answering. CSX 3015 still runs. Under the Viking blue, there are 2 earlier coats of paint, each one a document Ford never wanted filed. The car they tried to make disappear has crossed the auction block 3 times for a combined $16.1 million. CSX 3303 is still unaccounted for somewhere on the California coast or in pieces. The one ghost in this story nobody has closed. Subscribe if you want more investigations into the cars corporate lawyers tried to bury. And share this with someone who still thinks Ford always played it straight.